Welcome to This Explainer. You know, when we think about ancient epics like the Mahabharata, our minds usually jump straight to clashing swords, dramatic speeches, and just massive, sprawling battlefields. But today we're unpacking an excerpt that is completely different, but honestly, just as profound. We're looking specifically at Krishna's journey home to Dwaraka after he spent time with his cousins, the Pandavas. So it raises a pretty fascinating question. How do legendary kings and divine heroes actually say goodbye? Well, instead of epic battles, the text we're diving into reveals the incredibly intricate rituals and the surprisingly relatable human emotions involved in just bidding a long farewell to the people you love. Turns out, parting ways back then was a monumental event. It was meticulously structured, but absolutely anchored in very real human affection.
Section 1. Farewells at Khandavaprastha.
Okay, let's look at how Krishna, who has been living happily with the Pandavas, suddenly decides he wants to see his father. He doesn't just, pack a bag and head out the door. He begins his departure with a very deliberate hierarchy of respect. First, he salutes Yudhishthira, and actually bows his head right to the feet of his aunt, Pritha, who's also known as Kunti. In return, she smells his head and embraces him, which was an ancient gesture of deep maternal blessing. Then he goes to his sister, Subhadra, and the text specifically points out that his eyes are filled with tears as he comforts her, and she gives him messages to take back home to their relatives. Finally, he meets with Draupadi and the priest, Dhaumya, consoling Draupadi and officially obtaining her leave. The sheer emotional intelligence and duty woven into this exchange is just amazing to see.
Moving on to ancient rites of departure.
What's really fascinating about this next phase is the meticulous, almost procedural preparation you had to do before traveling in ancient times. Once the emotional farewells are done, the practical and spiritual prep begins, and it's incredibly intricate. First, Krishna purifies himself with a bath and puts on his ornaments. Then, he worships the gods and the brahmanas with floral wreaths, mantras, bows of the head, and perfumes. Moving to the outer apartments, he offers vessels full of curd, fruits, and parched grain. They give him their benedictions, and he presents them with wealth. This really shows us how a journey wasn't just getting from point A to point B. It was a highly consecrated event, tied to auspicious stellar conjunctions and lunar days, basically making absolutely sure the universe was aligned for safe passage.
Next up, boarding the divine chariot. With the rites totally complete, Krishna steps out to his legendary transport. And the details here are staggering. Think of this as an ancient superhero's gear check. He steps onto an excellent car of gold, renowned for its massive speed. Flying high above is his famous banner with the figure of Garuda, the mythical eagle. Inside, the chariot is fully loaded with his iconic weapons, the mace, the discus, the sword, and his formidable Shanga bow. And powering the whole thing, his legendary horses, Saivya and Sugriva. The epic scale of his departure is literally on full display.
But here's the thing. What makes this departure truly special isn't the golden chariot or the weapons or the horses. It's what the Pandava brothers do next, because they absolutely refuse to let him just drive off. Just look at the depth of their bond. King Yudhishthira, a powerful ruler himself, walks up to the chariot and out of pure affection asks Krishna's charioteer, Dwaraka, to step aside. Yudhishthira literally takes the reins to drive. Meanwhile, Arjuna is walking around the car fanning Krishna with a gold-handled white chamara. Bhima, the twins Nakula and Sahadeva, the priests, the citizens, they are all following on foot. These mighty kings are acting as humble servants out of deep, reverential love for their friend. Which brings us to the long, lingering goodbye. Because leaving the city limits wasn't the end of it. The mighty Pandava brothers and this whole entourage walked a massive half a yojana, that is, roughly 2 miles, on foot. They did this just to delay the inevitable final goodbye. It's such a striking image, this grand golden chariot slowly rolling down the road, trailed by an entire kingdom's leadership who just cannot bear to let their guest go. Eventually, Krishna knows they can't follow him forever. He respectfully addresses Yudhishthira and begs him to stop. And what happens next is just a beautiful display of mutual respect. Krishna reverentially takes hold of Yudhishthira's feet, but Yudhishthira immediately pulls him up, smells his head one last time as a blessing, and finally, explicitly, gives him leave by saying goodbye. But even then, they don't just turn around and walk away. The text describes this moment perfectly. Out of the love and affection they bore him, the Pandavas gazed on Krishna as long as he was within sight.
They literally just stood there in the road, watching the chariot shrink into the distance. It is such a profoundly relatable human emotion, right? These are legendary heroes, but in this moment, they're just family members waving off a loved one, watching until the very last speck disappears. And then, the text drops this incredible half-sentence. Unsatiated, though their minds were with looking at him. Their minds actually followed him, even when he was out of sight. It's so poetic and perfectly captures that universal feeling of missing someone at the exact second they leave. You know that feeling when you're staring at the road but your mind is still hungry for their presence? Finally, let's look at the two parallel homecomings. As we wrap up, the text brilliantly splits our focus to contrast how these two epic figures return to their separate, daily lives after all that emotional buildup. It's a beautifully mirrored resolution. Yudhishthira unwillingly heads back to his capital in a hurry. He dismisses all his relatives and brothers and just seeks quiet solace in the company of his wife, Draupadi. Meanwhile, Krishna speeds into his city of Dwaraka. He's greeted by the principal Yadavas, worships his mother and father, salutes his brother Valadeva, and embraces a massive list of family members, Pradyumna, Shamba, Nishata. After getting leave from all the elders, he finally enters the apartments of Rukmini. So this grand public departure ultimately resolves into deeply intimate, domestic homecomings for both of them. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating final thought. Why do ancient texts like the Mahabharata prioritize the emotional weight of a simple departure just as much as an epic clash of kingdoms? Well, maybe it's because these texts aren't just historical or mythological records of war, they're master classes in the human experience. They show us that beneath all the golden chariots and magical weapons, it's the everyday transitions, the quiet tears, the lingering hugs, the staring down an empty road that truly unite us all. So next time you say a long goodbye to someone you love, remember you are partaking in a ritual that is as old and as epic as humanity itself.